first, a joke.
So what's a vagina's favorite hors d'oeuvre platter? A charcuterie board.
What's poppin'? It's Radio Freensmith episode 357. You might remember a while back I did an episode on Ildjarn, I think maybe a year ago. Whoa, I guess it was like 2 years ago almost. Episode 260, Ildjarn. Definitely one of the lunatic fringes of black metal. The kind of stuff you really have to be in the mood for. And lately, I've found myself in the mood for a whole lot of Ildjarn. So I thought, why not make good on my promise to do an episode about bands that were influenced by Ildjarn? Because despite the fact, or honestly perhaps because of the fact that Ildjarn has this really idiosyncratic, alienated style, strange and unique even for black metal, there's a whole bunch of bands out there that took concepts Ildjarn came up with and kind of ran with them in some interesting new directions. Before we get started with this episode, quick disclaimer, I'm not going to be covering Udeliger or Akitsa in this episode, because I have plans for those guys in the future.
I had my orders from the Emperor himself. He has something special planned for me.
So keep an eye or an ear out for that. As far as any other band that took influence from Ildjarn goes, if they don't show up in this episode, it actually is entirely personal. I hate the band in question, and I hate you for liking them.
I hate you. I hate you. I don't even know you, and I hate your guts. I hope all the bad things in life happen to you and nobody else.
And this is the only possible explanation for this situation, so please be sure to call me a ding-dong in the comments. Anyways, if you're not familiar with Ildjarn,
shame on you.
You didn't watch episode 260, did you? I mean, come on, Ildjarn, this is important black metal stuff. He's the other weird guy from the early days of Emperor that went off and started a whole new subgenre of music. The guy that wasn't Mortis, the bald guy, that's Ildjarn. But honestly, it's okay, because the first band we're talking about today, their early material sounds so much like Ildjarn that even if you haven't listened to episode 260, or if you've never listened to Ildjarn at all, you can get a pretty good idea of what Ildjarn sounds like from listening to this band's early material. Band in question, Bone Owl, who are probably most famous nowadays for doing a split with the Black Twilight Circle originators Ashtwautas, as well as running the Klaxon Records distro, which is a really easy way to buy all kinds of great albums from Bill Skriniar and Argus Lent and Grand Belial's Key and whatnot. In fact, I'm pretty sure when the guy from Einsatzgruppen sent good old King Cobra JFS that GBK shirt as a joke, he bought it from Klaxon. But these guys, this Bone Owl project, this duo of black metal weirdos, they're not just a Ildjarn worship band, they're pretty much the Ildjarn worship band, particularly during their demo era. Which means you're getting hit with some uber deconstructed, hyper simplistic, alienated sounding black metal. It's hammering these repetitive, simple savage riffs into your brain, to the point where when the music does shift, shit, dude, what changed? There's like one note that's out of place, but it screws with you. Because the music's so hypnotic and monomaniacal, these incremental little shifts really stand out. This was also the case with Ildjarn, but in Ildjarn, a lot of those shifts didn't even make musical sense unless you listen to every 30-second weird little songlet on the album. Bone Owl's musical concepts tend to be a little bit more self-contained, so they're slightly more accessible in that aspect. Aesthetically, however, they may be even less accessible than Ildjarn. I mean, you heard all that feedback. These guys are raw as fuck, abrasive. I feel like they've got a lot of connections to the noise music scene. And wouldn't you believe it, their full-length albums, of which there are two, are substantially rawer sounding than their demos, at least to my ears. Particularly the first full-length album, Meaningless Leaning Mess. Yeah, that's some real raw stuff. But despite that, they indulge in some rather punkish grooves, even more so than Ildjarn did. That was basically a skank beat going there for a second. It's actually pretty catchy stuff once you get used to how raw it is, which is of course an essential part of the music. I mean, there's a reason that album was initially put out by Nuclear War Now. Pretty much makes Blasphemy sound like Wolves in the Throne Room. Their second album, An Obelisk Marks the Line, from 2020, is definitely my favorite of the two. In fact, apart from the So I Must Take from the Earth demo from 2006, it's probably my favorite thing they've ever done. This one keeps the Ildjarn worship intact, but it also brings in other early Norwegian black metal influences. I hear a lot of Darkthrone and a lot of Death Crush era mayhem, specifically songs like Necrolust. Despite that, it still maintains that gonzo Ildjarn feel, particularly when you get to the really deconstructed parts like this, where they're breaking down riffs from early in their song to their component elemental bits in an act that almost resembles the songwriting equivalent of self-mutilation. Definitely not a bad place to start your Bone Owl journey if you're enough of a wacko to listen to Bone Owl. I mean, I guess I am, and I turned out okay, right, guys? But I'll tell you what, as much as I like Bone Owl, I actually prefer their drummer's side project, Raspberry Bulbs, which also has a whole lot of Ildjarn influence, but as opposed to really heavily meditating on all of the different Ildjarn concepts, they instead take some basic ideas from Ildjarn and recast them into some startling new molds of sound. The pace for Raspberry Bulbs tends to be a little bit slower than that in Bone Owl and Ildjarn, but it maintains that sort of hypnotic, grinding atmosphere. But in this case, the mechanistic drumming actually has a lot of post-punk to it, at least to my ears, to the point where I would almost class this as a black metal take on indie rock, but in a way less annoying way than any other band to try their hand at this style. It's less annoying hipster tourists kind of stumbling into black metal and more an authentic, artistically sound attempt at blending multiple different worlds of music. And there's not just weird droning post-punk going on here either. These guys get pretty heavily into gothic death rock of the 80s variety, and even some weirder shit that almost sounds like Die Kreuzen or No Means No at points. Like, they'll use natural harmonics, weird guitar feedback, a whole lot of odd scratching noises, which were, part of what Ildjarn was doing, but they go even further in that direction, while maintaining this sort of catchy bounciness. It's really unique sounding music, but it manages to keep enough of that black metal nastiness in mind to prevent it from turning into just regular old math rock, at least to my ears. I don't know, maybe you hate Raspberry Bulbs, but I think they're kind of cool. Certainly a unique way to take that kind of Ildjarn sound and mold it into new stuff. And definitely worth a listen if you're an Ildjarn fan and you want to see how far you can bend that style. Up next, we got a band that in some aspects is even weirder and more underground than Raspberry Bulbs and Bone Owl, but at the same time, they're a lot more traditional in their black metal influences, while still definitely being an offspring of Ildjarn. That being Russian's Krюkokreст, or Hook Cross. These guys are a newer discovery for me, despite the fact they've been around for maybe like 4 or 5 years now. They've really been monopolizing my music listening habits as of late, and they're a big part of why I finally got off my ass to do this episode. Krюkokreст are part of a larger Russian scene, the Pskov Brotherhood, along with bands like Hexen Vomit, Lieshi, and Sidecut Slave. And we know how those Russians are with their black metal collective actions, Blaze Birth Hall, Far Eastern Black Wolves, etc. I don't know too much about the Pskov Brotherhood, but Krюkokreст, if I'm even saying that right.
Hey Bobby, look, I'm American. I think I'll use my credit card.
Are fucking sick as hell. These fellas are fond of taking the shamanistic affectations of Ildjarn and really emphasizing the spiritual aspect of the music, where you get this tribal ambient throb of oddly warped guitar. But at the same time, the riff-to-riff counterpoint is a little bit closer to more standard black metal, to where it almost sounds like more normal-sounding black metal reabsorbing the Ildjarn collective impulse without cheapening those Ildjarnic aspects. An example of more normal black metal stuff going on would be their usage of bar chords, like right here. Ildjarn wasn't ever really big on these kind of shimmering, ringing out bar chords. Definitely more of a standard Norwegian black metal thing. But they've managed to incorporate that aspect into the weird, Neanderthal caveman take on shamanic folk music that is the Ildjarn sound world.
As I said during the campaign, I'm just a cave.
It's almost like they're taking that caveman Ildjarn perspective and using it to re-examine standard black metal tropes. Like, there's songs on this first album of theirs where it sounds like Ildjarn covering some weird combination of a Blaze Birth Hall band and a Le Legion Noir band. Like this riff right here, it starts out long-form Blaze Birth Hall melancholic Slavic mysticism of the olden variety, but as it goes forward, it gets colored with a certain dissonance and melodic whimsy that has elements of the French black metal style to it. And yet their approach is way more binary and primitive than anything you would hear bands from either of those scenes do. Like, listen to the way the drums really cut up the melody right around here with that mechanical Ildjarn-esque beat. I guess it's less black metal reabsorbing Ildjarn and more an Ildjarn style band offering their commentary on more sophisticated styles of black metal. Their second album, the one that got me into them, goes even further with their re-examination of French influences, to the point where they might sound very familiar to an old favorite of this show.
야, 날씨 나를 완전 제대로 잡고.
Yeah, you're not wrong. This definitely does sound like some Peste Noir. In fact, I've seen people online accusing these guys of ripping Peste Noir off. I wouldn't go that far, because they still got plenty of that Ildjarn-esque shit intact. Witness. Yes, there is a Peste Noir quality to the riffs. These guys are definitely influenced by them. But Peste Noir never went this ultra-binary primitive with their sound in the way that Crюkokreст does. I mean, you might as well accuse every Norwegian black metal band of being a Mayhem ripoff, or every melodic Swedish band of being a dissection ripoff. No, to my ears, this is more of an interesting reinterpretation of concepts from Peste Noir. If you want a bad Peste Noir ripoff, go listen to Bisma Ash.
Damn, that's hateful!
I mean, check this part out. They've taken a standard Ildjarn feature, a hypnotic bass line, and all of its primitivism, but then they've applied it to this Peste Noirish melodic skeleton. And to that they add some real nasty, noisy feedback for the purposes of sonic texture. And they've also got these decidedly non-Peste Noir sounding keyboards. I mean, this is some genuinely mind-bending shit. And I, for one, find it to be quite interesting. In fact, this would be my album of the year if it had come out this year and not 2 years ago. I mean, better late than never. I finally heard it, guys, and it's good stuff. But it's not all just weird French shit going on in this album either. They also bring back plenty of the Slavonic black metal influences. There's a lot of stuff going on from German black metal. There's a lot of more straightforward Ildjarn stuff that then turns into just Krюkokreст unique weirdness. Like this song right here, my personal favorite of the album, Sailing to the Island of Talovsk, starts out very traditional Ildjarn sounding with a delightfully bouncy, primitive caveman sort of riff.
The fuck you call me?
Well, you are a caveman sound.
Yeah, fucking caveman. Listen, burger boy.
Then you get your characteristic drum roll into the same repeated melody, this time with vocals. As far as just straight up Ildjarn worship goes, this shit's pretty much perfect. Even the counterpoint riff, very Ildjarny, very early Norwegian black metal primitivism. Almost like a hyper-alienated primitive version of Darkthrone. But then this weird shit happens. There's a final repetition of the riff into a drum crash. And boom, out of nowhere, weird stuttery dungeon synth, building on those same melodies from the black metal section of the song, with an intentionally lo-fi synthetic sound, before then proceeding to bring in some even stranger stuff, with the reintroduction of those echoed, reverbed out vocals and these very shamanic sounding drums as the synth arrangement stops being stuttery and percussive and opens up into a more fluid motion. This is some mind-expanding shit, on the level of what you might find in the best of Grausamkeit, or maybe even demo-era Enslaved, and the black metal gradually bleeds back in, bringing us back to the Ildjarn-esque primitivism. I can't say enough good stuff about this song. Probably my favorite new black metal song I've heard all year. Crükokreст. Absolutely check them out if you're into Ildjarn, or honestly, if you're just into black metal in general. If you don't like this stuff, I'm kind of worried about you.
I bet you're gay.
That is not true. I am not gay. I've got a calendar with naked ladies on at home.
All right, final musical act of the night. Another weird, red-headed bastard stepchild of Ildjarn. That being Wold, a Canadian act who, like the other bands we've discussed tonight, kind of re-examine the whole Ildjarn ideal from a different perspective. In this case, from one entirely outside of conventional black metal or even metal or rock music at all. These guys come to us from the world of noise. Apparently, they've got a whole bunch of albums. I'm only really familiar with their Screech album from 2007, but I've been listening to it pretty regularly since it came out, and I think it's pretty dank, so I'm here to tell you all about it.
So you're gonna just sit here and enjoy.
Now, the connection between Ildjarn and noise music really isn't that far-fetched, especially considering some later Ildjarn songs started pulling shit like this. And the first track on Wold's Screech Owl album is very much in that aesthetic and compositional vein. Pretty much just sounds like listening to Ildjarn on a broken speaker. But the more you pay attention to this album, the more you start to realize there actually is a sense of structure to this music. There are patterns. There is logic. And honestly, despite the fact that they're not on Metal Archives, I would still consider these guys to be a black metal band, at least on this album. At times it actually gets quite beautiful. This song in particular, The Field Hag, is built out of these ethereal droning melodies that honestly just gain more of a bittersweet melancholic quality as the level of noise and dissonance increases. Almost sounds like a combination of the more black metal works of Ildjarn with the more droning synthetic ambient of albums like Landscapes and Hardanger Vida. Also, this vocal performance is fucking harrowing. It's like we've got multiple characters conversing, and when that actual field hag shows up, she's gonna start speaking some truth to power. Check this shit. That was pretty nuts. But I don't know, something about the combination of noise with these very haunting, droning melodies really does it for me. Other tracks on this album incorporate more standard black metal riffage, but just warped in a way that only a noise musician could pull off. It's almost like remembering a black metal album you've never actually heard in a dream. Like, there is a black metal riff in there somewhere. Pretty damn good one. And even the way they move between riffs and the way they add in drum beats, where they place the vocals, you could tell this started out as a black metal song, but somewhere along the line it just got fucked up, and now it sounds like this. It's like a ghost of a black metal song. I mean, if Ildjarn is the ultimate deconstruction of black metal, this is the end product of just scrap metal lying on the ground, but in a way that's still musically interesting. It's almost somewhat catchy in its own weird, fucked up way. And in fact, my personal favorite song on the album, I would consider to be very catchy. At least I get portions of it stuck in my head every so often. That would be the sublime, minimalistic titan of a closer, Undying Fire of Urien. All that you just heard, that's the song's riff. The whole song is just based around meditating on that. Gradually layers of sound are moved around, but it's pretty damn monolithic for almost its entire runtime, right up until the end of the song, where they start to gradually peel back layers of noise and you're just left with this sublime melodic keyboard drone. I would say this album is a spiritual experience, much in the way that finally understanding Ildjarn's music was back when I was getting into black metal. As far as noise albums go, this one's definitely one of my favorites. And as far as being a successor to Ildjarn goes, I'd say pretty much all the acts we covered this week did a pretty damn good job. Bone Owl, Raspberry Bulbs, Krюkokreст, and Wold. Check them out if you want to see how fucking crazy black metal can be. Hope you enjoyed hearing about all that crap, but even if you didn't, thanks for listening to the end, and I'll see you around.
Why don't you click your heels together 3 times and go back to Africa?